I was sitting in my hotel room getting ready for bed, the clock on the nightstand showing it was just past 11 p.m. The trip had been long, and I was looking forward to some much-needed rest. Just as I was about to turn off the lights, I heard something from the room next door. At first I thought it was just the television, but the noises grew louder and more distinct. My heart sank as I recognized my wife's voice, unmistakable even through the thin walls. "Oh my God!" she cried out, followed by a series of moans that made my stomach churn. I could hear the bed creaking, the headboard hitting the wall rhythmically. It was a sound I had come to associate with intimacy, and now it felt like a dagger twisting in my gut. "Da da da da!" Her voice rang out again, punctuated by the unmistakable sounds of sex. My mind raced, disbelief and anger mixing into a potent cocktail of emotions. I couldn't just sit here and do nothing. I had to catch them in the act, to confront her and this mystery lover she had taken to a hotel. I grabbed my phone, intending to record what I was hearing as evidence. With a deep breath, I crept out of my room and into the hallway. I didn't know what I would do next, but I couldn't stay still. The sounds from the next room grew louder as I approached the door. I could hear her lover's voice now, deep and commanding, urging her on. "Just like that, baby," he groaned, and I clenched my fists, barely able to contain my rage. I took out a spare room keycard I had swiped from the cleaning cart earlier that day, hoping it would work on their door. If not, I was ready to knock it down if I had to. I slid the card into the slot, the light turning green with a soft beep. My heart pounded in my chest as I turned the handle slowly, pushing the door open just enough to peek inside. The sight that greeted me was one I would never forget. My wife, naked and writhing on the bed, her back arched as her lover moved over her. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. This was it. I had to act. But before I could make my move, the door flew open with a force that startled all three of us. I was prepared to confront them, but what I saw stunned me into silence. There in the doorway stood my best friend, Jason, with a look of shock and betrayal that mirrored my own. "What the hell is going on here?" he shouted, his eyes darting between my wife and her lover. I watched as my wife's face turned pale, her eyes wide with fear. Her lover, on the other hand, scrambled off the bed, trying to cover himself with the bedsheet. The room was filled with tension, each of us frozen in place as the reality of the situation sank in. This wasn't just a betrayal by my wife, it was a betrayal by my best friend. The man standing in the doorway was supposed to be on a business trip himself, but here he was, discovering his own wife's infidelity. And the man in bed with my wife? None other than Jason's younger brother, who had apparently taken advantage of his sibling's absence to engage in this sordid affair. I could feel the anger rising within me, but there was also a part of me that wanted to collapse under the weight of this double betrayal. Jason's face twisted with rage as he lunged at his brother, throwing a punch that sent him sprawling to the floor. The bed creaked again as my wife scrambled to cover herself, sobbing hysterically. "Get out!" Jason roared, grabbing his brother by the collar and dragging him towards the door. "Get the hell out of here and never come back!" I stood there, numb, as Jason shoved his brother out of the room and turned back to face me. For a moment, we just stared at each other, two men united by heartbreak and fury. My wife, now huddled on the bed, looked at me with pleading eyes, but I had no words for her. Jason broke the silence, his voice trembling with emotion. "I am so sorry, man. I had no idea." I shook my head, unable to speak. There were no words that could make sense of this mess. As Jason left the room, I knew that our lives had been irrevocably changed. The trap I had set had sprung, but the catch was far more devastating than I could have ever imagined. Jason's departure left an eerie silence in the room. My wife, Emily, sat on the edge of the bed, her face buried in her hands as she sobbed uncontrollably. The reality of the situation was sinking in for both of us. I felt a strange mix of anger, betrayal, and an overwhelming sense of disbelief. "How could you, Emily?" I finally managed to choke out, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. "How could you do this to us?" She looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen from crying. "I'm so sorry, Tom. I never meant for this to happen. It just did. That's not an excuse," I snapped, my anger boiling over. You didn't just trip and fall into bed with him. This was a choice, a deliberate, selfish choice. She winced at my words, but I couldn't bring myself to feel any sympathy for her. I needed answers. I needed to understand how everything had gone so horribly wrong. Why him? I asked, pacing the room in a futile attempt to calm myself. Why Jason S. brother of all people? Emily took a deep, shuddering breath. It wasn't planned, Tom. We met at a party a few months ago, and he was there when I felt like you were in tea. We started talking, and it just spiraled from there. Her words cut deep. I had been so focused on work, on providing for us, that I hadn't noticed her drifting away, but that didn't absolve her of her actions. And Jason? He didn't know, did he? I asked, already knowing the answer. She shook her head. No, he had no idea. We were careful. We only met when we knew he was away. My blood boiled at her admission. The deceit, the lies, the careful planning, it all made me sick to my stomach. I wanted to lash out, to make her feel a fraction of the pain she had caused me. Before I could say anything else, there was a soft knock on the door. It creaked open, revealing Jason S. wife, Laura, standing there with a look of utter devastation on her face. She had obviously overheard everything, and her eyes were filled with a mix of sorrow and anger. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. I nodded, stepping aside to let her in. Emily stared at her, wide-eyed and trembling as Laura approached her. The tension in the room was palpable. "I never thought you would do something like this," Laura said, her voice cold and controlled. "To betray your husband and sleep with my brother-in-law, how could you, Emily?" Emily broke down into fresh sobs, unable to meet Laura's gaze. "I'm so sorry, Laura. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I never wanted this to happen." Laura shook her head, her expression hardening. "It doesn't matter what you wanted. The damage is done. You've ruined 2 marriages tonight." I watched as Laura turned her back on Emily and faced me. "Tom, I know this is difficult, but we need to figure out what we are going to do. Both of our lives have just been shattered, and we can just stand here in this hotel room forever." I nodded, appreciating her strength in this moment of chaos. "You are right. We need to leave. We can stay here." Laura and I helped Emily gather her things. The 3 of us left the hotel room, walking down the hallway in a tense silence. Jason was waiting for us in the lobby, his face a mask of barely contained fury. He was still reeling from the shock of finding his wife and his brother together, and I could see the pain in his eyes. "We are leaving," Laura said, her voice firm. "We'll figure this out, but we can do it here." Jason nodded, his jaw clenched. "Let's go. We'll talk when we get home." The drive back was excruciatingly silent. Emily sat beside me, her head bowed in shame, while Jason and Laura sat in the back, lost in their own thoughts. The gravity of the situation was overwhelming, and none of us knew what the future held. When we finally reached our house, Laura and Jason went their separate ways, leaving Emily and me alone once more. The house felt like a stranger, filled with memories of happier times that now seemed tainted and hollow. "Tom, please," Emily whispered, reaching out to me. "I know I have hurt you, but can we try to work this out? Can we find a way to move past this?" I looked at her, my heart heavy with conflicting emotions. Part of me wanted to forgive her, to try and salvage the life we had built together. But another part of me, the part that had been shattered by her betrayal, couldn't see a way forward. "I don't know, Emily," I said honestly. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I understand. Just please, let's try." As I stood there, torn between love and betrayal, I realized that this was just the beginning of a long and painful journey. The road ahead was uncertain, and the future of our marriage hung in the balance. And somewhere, deep down, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The next morning was a haze of awkward silence and unresolved tension. Emily and I went through the motions of our daily routines, but everything felt off. The kitchen, once a place of laughter and shared moments, now felt like a battleground of unspoken words. Jason called me around noon, his voice thick with the remnants of last night's chaos. "We need to meet, Tom. Just you and me. Let us figure out what the hell we're going to do." I agreed, and we decided to meet at a small cafe downtown. The place was neutral territory, away from the memories of our shattered marriages. When I arrived, Jason was already there, staring into his coffee cup with a look of deep contemplation. "Hey," I said, sliding into the seat across from him. He looked up, his eyes tired and filled with a mix of anger and sorrow. "Hey." We sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of our shared betrayal hanging heavily between us. Finally, Jason spoke. "I never saw this coming, Tom. Not from my own brother, and certainly not from Emily. I feel like an idiot." "Join the club," I muttered, taking a sip of my coffee. I still can wrap my head around it. How could they do this to us? Jason shook his head, a bitter smile playing on his lips. "People can be incredibly selfish. That is the only explanation I have got." We talked for a while longer, venting our frustrations and trying to make sense of the mess our lives had become. It was clear that our marriages were hanging by a thread, and neither of us knew if they could be saved. "What are you going to do?" Jason finally asked, looking at me with a mix of curiosity and concern. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to try and fix things, but another part of me just wants to walk away and never look back. What about you?" Jason sighed heavily. "Laura and I talked last night. We are both devastated, but we are going to try counseling. See if there's anything left to salvage. What about Emily? Have you talked to her?" I nodded. "We talked a bit, but it's as hard. I don't know if I can ever trust her again." "Trust is a tricky thing," Jason said, his voice softening. "Once it's broken, it's damn near impossible to repair. But if you still love her, maybe it's worth trying." I appreciated his words, even though they didn't make my decision any easier. We finished our coffees and parted ways, each of us heading back to our respective hells. When I returned home, Emily was sitting on the couch, her eyes red and puffy from crying. She looked up as I entered, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "How was Jason?" she asked tentatively. "Not great," I replied, sitting down across from her. We are both struggling to figure out what to do next. Emily nodded, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "Tom, I know I've destroyed your trust in me, but I want to try and fix this. I want to go to counseling, to do whatever it takes to make things right between us." I took a deep breath, considering her words. "Counseling might be a good idea, but Emily, this isn't going to be easy. It's going to take a lot of time and effort, and I can promise that things will ever be the same." "I understand," she said quietly. "I am willing to do whatever it takes." We made the decision to start marriage counseling, hoping it would help us navigate the rocky path ahead. The first session was scheduled for the following week, and in the meantime, we tried to coexist as peacefully as possible. It wasn't easy. Every glance, every touch was loaded with tension and unspoken pain. On the day of our first counseling session, we arrived at the therapist's office feeling a mix of anxiety and hope. Dr. Turner was a kind, middle-aged woman with a calming presence. She welcomed us warmly and guided us into her cozy office. "Thank you for coming," she began, her voice soothing. "I know this is a difficult time for both of you. The fact that you are here shows a willingness to work through your issues, and that's an important first step." Emily and I exchanged a hesitant glance, both of us unsure of what to expect. Dr. Turner encouraged us to share our feelings openly and honestly, assuring us that this was a safe space. Emily spoke first, her voice trembling. "I know I have hurt Tom deeply, and I am so sorry for what I've done. I never meant to betray him, but I let myself get caught up in something I couldn't control. I want to make things right, but I don't know how." I listened to her words, feeling a mixture of anger and sadness. When it was my turn to speak, I struggled to find the right words. "I loved you, Emily. I trusted you, and you shattered that trust. I don't know if I can ever forgive you for what you've done, but part of me still loves you, and that's why I'm here. I want to try, but I don't know if it's enough." Dr. Turner nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Trust is the foundation of any relationship, and when it's broken, it takes time to rebuild. Emily, it's important for you to understand the depth of Tom's pain and to take responsibility for your actions. And Tom, it is important for you to express your feelings openly, even if they are difficult to hear. We spent the rest of the session delving into our emotions, exploring the roots of our problems, and discussing ways to rebuild trust. It was exhausting and painful, but also cathartic. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. As we left Dr. Turner's office, Emily reached for my hand. I hesitated for a moment, then took it, squeezing gently. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a step in the right direction. The following weeks were a roller coaster of emotions. We attended counseling sessions regularly, each one peeling back another layer of our relationship. Some days were better than others. There were moments of connection and understanding, but also moments of anger and doubt. One evening, as we were sitting on the couch after a particularly intense session, Emily turned to me, her eyes filled with tears. "Tom, I need to tell you something," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's more to the story. I haven't been completely honest with you." My heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" She took a deep breath, her hands trembling. "That night at the hotel, it wasn't the first time. I've been seeing Jason's brother for a few months. I didn't want to tell you because I was afraid it would be too much, that it would destroy any chance we had of fixing this." Her confession hit me like a ton of bricks. The betrayal ran deeper than I had realized, and the pain was almost unbearable. "I can't believe this," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "You've been lying to me this whole time. How am I supposed to trust anything you say?" Emily broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. "I'm so sorry, Tom. I know I've messed up, but I'm trying to make things right. Please, give me a chance." I stood up, my mind racing. "I need some time to think. I can't deal with this right now." I left the house, needing to clear my head. The night air was cool and crisp, and I walked aimlessly, my thoughts a chaotic swirl of emotions. How could she do this to me? How could she lie and betray me so completely? As I wandered through the streets, I found myself at a park where Emily and I had spent many happy moments together. The memories were bittersweet, a stark contrast to the reality we now faced. I sat on a bench, staring at the stars, and let the tears flow. I didn't know if our marriage could survive this latest revelation, but I knew that I had to try. For my sake, for Emily's sake, and for the sake of the love we had once shared. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but as I sat there, I made a promise to myself. I would do everything in my power to heal, to find a way forward no matter how difficult it might be. Only time would tell if our love was strong enough to withstand the trials we faced. The following morning, I woke up with a heavy heart. Emily's confession had deepened the wound, and I wasn't sure how to move forward. I decided to reach out to Dr. Turner for an emergency session, hoping she could help me process this new information. When I arrived at her office, she greeted me with a warm, understanding smile. "Tom, I heard from Emily about the latest development. I'm glad you reached out. This is a difficult situation, but we all work through it together." I nodded, feeling a glimmer of hope. "I don't know what to do, Dr. Turner. I thought I was ready to try and rebuild our relationship, but now I'm not so sure." She leaned forward, her expression compassionate. "It's completely normal to feel this way. Betrayal is one of the hardest things to overcome in a relationship, but the fact that you are here, willing to talk about it, shows that you still care. Let us start by exploring your feelings and seeing where that leads us." I poured my heart out, sharing the pain, anger, and confusion that had consumed me since Emily's latest confession. Dr. Turner listened patiently, offering gentle guidance and support. By the end of the session, I felt a bit more grounded, though the path ahead still seemed daunting. When I returned home, Emily was waiting for me. Her eyes were red from crying, and she looked genuinely remorseful. "How did it go?" she asked tentatively. I sighed, sitting down beside her. "It helped. Dr. Turner gave me some things to think about. But Emily, this is going to be a long and difficult journey. I don't know if I can ever fully forgive you, but I am willing to try for now." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you, Tom. I know I don't deserve it, but I promise I'll do whatever it takes to make things right." The days that followed were filled with tentative steps toward healing. We continued our counseling sessions, both together and individually. Emily opened up about the reasons behind her affair, revealing deep-seated insecurities and feelings of neglect. It was painful to hear, but it also gave me a better understanding of her actions. One evening, after a particularly emotional session, we decided to take a walk in the park. The air was cool, and the stars were just beginning to peek out from behind the clouds. "Do you remember the first time we came here?" Emily asked, her voice soft and filled with nostalgia. I smiled faintly. "Yeah, it was our third date. You made us a picnic, and we spent hours talking and laughing. It was perfect." She nodded, a wistful look in her eyes. "I want to get back to that, Tom. I want to find that happiness again, but I know it won't be easy." As we walked, I realized that despite everything, I still loved her. The road to rebuilding our relationship would be long and arduous, but I was willing to take it one step at a time. The weeks turned into months, and slowly, we began to find a new rhythm. Trust was a fragile thing, and it took time to rebuild. There were setbacks and moments of doubt, but we kept pushing forward, determined to make it work. During one of our counseling sessions, Dr. Turner suggested a weekend getaway to help us reconnect. It was a daunting prospect, but we agreed to give it a try. We chose a small cabin in the mountains, away from the distractions of daily life. The first day was awkward, filled with tentative conversations and forced smiles. But as the weekend progressed, we began to relax. We hiked through the woods, cooked meals together, and even shared a few laughs. It was a small step, but it felt like progress. On the last night, we sat by the fireplace, the warmth of the flames casting a soft glow around the room. Emily looked at me, her eyes filled with a mix of hope and fear. "Tom, I know we've been through a lot, and I don't expect everything to be perfect, but I want you to know that I am committed to us. I am committed to rebuilding our marriage and earning back your trust." I reached out, taking her hand in mine. "I believe you, Emily, and I am committed too. We have a long way to go, but I am willing to fight for us." As we sat there holding hands and staring into the fire, I felt a sense of peace. The road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful about the future. When we returned home, we continued our efforts to rebuild our relationship. We set aside time each week for date nights, and we made a conscious effort to communicate openly and honestly. It wasn't always easy, and there were times when the pain of the past threatened to overwhelm us. But we kept pushing forward, determined to create a new foundation for our marriage. Months passed, and slowly but surely things began to improve. The scars of betrayal would never fully disappear, but they were beginning to fade. We were learning to trust each other again, to find joy in the small moments, and to appreciate the love we still shared. One evening, as we were sitting on the porch watching the sunset, Emily turned to me with a shy smile. "Tom, I have something for you." She handed me a small, beautifully wrapped box. Inside was a silver bracelet with a simple yet elegant design. I looked at her, puzzled. "It is a promise bracelet," she explained, "a symbol of my commitment to you, to us. I know words aren't enough, so I wanted to give you something tangible, something you can hold on to when things get tough." I slipped the bracelet onto my wrist, feeling a swell of emotion. "Thank you, Emily. This means a lot to me." She leaned in, her eyes shining with love and gratitude. "I love you, Tom. I know I've made mistakes, but I'm so grateful for your willingness to forgive and to fight for us." "I love you too," I replied, pulling her into a gentle kiss. "We've come a long way, and I believe we can make it through anything as long as we are together." As we sat there, wrapped in each other's arms, I realized that while the journey had been incredibly difficult, it had also brought us closer in ways I hadn't thought possible. We had faced our darkest moments and emerged stronger, more resilient, and more committed to each other than ever before. The road to healing and rebuilding our marriage was far from over, but I knew we would continue to take it one step at a time, together. And that, I realized, was all that mattered. As we settled into a new routine, life began to regain a semblance of normalcy. Emily and I continued our counseling sessions, and we both made a conscious effort to be more present and attentive to each other's needs. Our relationship was still fragile, but the progress we were making gave me hope. One weekend, we decided to take a day trip to the beach. It was a place filled with happy memories for us, and we hoped it would help us reconnect further. The sun was shining, and the salty breeze carried the promise of a fresh start. We spread out a blanket on the sand and spent the day lounging, swimming, and talking about anything and everything. For the first time in a long while, it felt like we were truly enjoying each other's company without the shadow of the past looming over us. In the late afternoon, as the sun began to dip toward the horizon, we took a walk along the shore. The water lapped at our feet, and Emily slipped her hand into mine. "This feels nice," she said, her voice soft, "like we are getting back to who we used to be." I nodded, squeezing her hand. "It does. We've come a long way, Emily. I'm proud of us." She smiled, but I could see a flicker of something in her eyes, something she was hesitant to say. "Tom, there's something I need to tell you." I felt a knot of anxiety form in my stomach. "What is it?" She took a deep breath, looking out at the ocean. "There's been something I have been keeping from you. I didn't want to tell you before because I was afraid it would make things worse, but I know I need to be completely honest with you." My heart pounded in my chest as I waited for her to continue. While I was seeing Jason S. brother, I found out he had been involved in some illegal activities. I didn't want to believe it at first, but it became clear that he was in deep. He asked me to help him launder some money, and in a moment of weakness, I agreed. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. "Emily, why didn't you tell me this sooner?" She looked at me, her eyes filled with regret. "I was scared, Tom. I didn't want to drag you into it, and I didn't want you to think even less of me. But I realized that if we are going to have any chance of moving forward, I need to come clean about everything." I took a step back, struggling to process this new information. "What does this mean for us, Emily? Are we in danger because of this?" "No, I don't think so," she said quickly. "I've cut all ties with him, and I made it clear that I wouldn't be involved in anything like that again. But I know it is a lot to take in, and I understand if you are angry." I was angry that she had kept something so serious from me, and angry that her actions had put us at risk. But more than anything, I was tired of the secrets and the lies. I needed to think, to figure out what this meant for our future. "Let's go back to the car," I said, my voice tight. "We need to talk about this." The drive home was tense and silent. Emily kept glancing at me, but I couldn't bring myself to look at her. My mind was racing, filled with questions and doubts. When we got home, I sat down at the kitchen table, my head in my hands. Emily stood across from me, looking lost and vulnerable. "Tom, please," she said, her voice trembling. "I know I've made so many mistakes, but I'm trying to make things right. I don't want to lose you." I took a deep breath, lifting my head to meet her gaze. "Emily, I need to know everything. No more secrets, no more lies. If we are going to have any chance of rebuilding our marriage, I need complete honesty from you." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I promise, Tom. No more secrets. I'll tell you everything." Over the next few hours, Emily laid it all out, the full extent of her involvement with Jason S. brother, the money laundering, and the fear that had kept her silent. It was a lot to take in. But as I listened, I realized that she was genuinely remorseful and committed to making things right. "I am willing to forgive you, Emily," I said finally. "But this is going to be a long road. We need to rebuild trust from the ground up, and it's going to take time and effort from both of us." "I understand," she replied, her voice filled with determination. "I'm ready to do whatever it takes." The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. We continued our counseling sessions, focusing on open communication and rebuilding trust. Emily made a concerted effort to be transparent about everything, and slowly, I began to feel a glimmer of hope that we could get through this. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Emily turned to me with a look of resolve. "Tom, Ivy decided to report everything to the authorities. It's the only way to truly put this behind us and move forward." I was taken aback. "Are you sure? That could be risky." She nodded. "I know, but it's the right thing to do. I can keep running from my mistakes. It is time to face the consequences and start fresh." I admired her courage, and it gave me hope that we were on the right path. The next day, Emily contacted the authorities and provided them with all the information she had. It was a difficult and stressful process, but she handled it with grace and determination. As the investigation unfolded, we continued to focus on rebuilding our relationship. We took small steps each day, finding ways to reconnect and rebuild the trust that had been shattered. It wasn't easy, and there were still moments of doubt and fear, but we faced them together. Months passed, and slowly but surely, the pain of the past began to fade. Our marriage was far from perfect, but it was stronger and more resilient than it had ever been. We had faced our darkest moments and come out the other side, more committed to each other than ever before. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the stars, Emily took my hand. "Thank you, Tom. Thank you for giving us a second chance." I squeezed her hand, feeling a sense of peace and contentment. "Thank you for fighting for us, Emily. We've been through a lot, but I believe we can make it through anything as long as we are together." As we sat there, wrapped in each other's arms, I realized that while the journey had been incredibly difficult, it had also brought us closer in ways I hadn't thought possible. We had faced our darkest moments and emerged stronger, more resilient, and more committed to each other than ever before. The road to healing and rebuilding our marriage was far from over, but I knew we would continue to take it one step at a time, together. And that, I realized, was all that mattered. As the weeks turned into months, the sense of stability in our relationship began to grow stronger. The investigation into Jason S. brother continued, but Emily and I chose to focus on rebuilding our lives rather than dwelling on the past. Our efforts to reconnect and communicate more openly were paying off, and for the first time in a long while, I felt optimistic about our future. One weekend, we decided to host a small dinner party for our closest friends. It was a way to celebrate our progress and reconnect with the people who had supported us through our darkest times. Jason and Laura were among the guests, and though things were still awkward between us, we were all committed to moving forward. The evening was filled with laughter and good food, a reminder of the joy and connection that had always been a part of our lives. As the night drew to a close, Jason pulled me aside. "Tom, I want to thank you for giving Emily and me a chance to make things right," he said, his voice sincere. "I know it hasn't been easy, but I appreciate your willingness to work through it." I nodded, feeling a sense of camaraderie. "It hasn't been easy for any of us, but I think we're all stronger for it. Here is to a brighter future." We clinked our glasses together, a silent promise to continue supporting each other through whatever challenges lay ahead. As the guests began to leave, Emily and I found ourselves alone in the kitchen, cleaning up and reflecting on the evening. "This was nice," she said, smiling as she handed me a plate to dry. "It feels good to be surrounded by friends again." "It does," I agreed, feeling a warmth in my heart. "We've come a long way, Emily. I am proud of us." She leaned in and kissed me softly. "I am proud of us too, Tom. I love you." "I love you too," I replied, pulling her into a hug, "and I am looking forward to whatever the future holds." The following week, we received a call from the authorities handling the investigation into Jason S. brother. They had gathered enough evidence to proceed with charges, and they wanted to meet with Emily to finalize her statement. The meeting was scheduled for the next day, and though we were both nervous, we knew it was a necessary step toward putting this chapter behind us. At the police station, Emily gave her statement, detailing her involvement and the steps she had taken to sever ties with Jason S. brother. The officers were understanding and supportive, acknowledging her courage in coming forward. After the meeting, as we walked back to the car, Emily seemed lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "That wasn't easy, but I feel better now," she said, taking my hand. "It's like I can finally breathe again." I squeezed her hand, offering a reassuring smile. "You did the right thing, Emily. I am proud of you." As we drove home, I realized that this was the beginning of a new chapter for us. We had faced our darkest moments and emerged stronger, more resilient, and more committed to each other than ever before. The next few months were filled with small victories and moments of joy. Emily and I continued to attend counseling, but we also made time for fun and adventure. We took weekend trips, tried new hobbies, and rediscovered the simple pleasures of being together. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Emily turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Tom, there's something I've been thinking about," she said, her voice hesitant. "I know we've been through a lot, and I don't want to rush anything, but I've been thinking about starting a family." Her words caught me by surprise, but as I looked into her eyes, I saw the sincerity and hope behind them. "You want to have a baby?" She nodded, a shy smile playing on her lips. "I do. I know it's a big step, but I think we are ready. We've come so far, and I believe we can do this together." I took a deep breath, considering her words. The idea of starting a family had always been part of our plans, but the events of the past year had put everything on hold. Now, as I looked at Emily, I realized that I was ready too. "I think we are ready too," I said, my heart swelling with love and anticipation. "Let us do it." Emily's smile widened, and she leaned in to kiss me. "I love you, Tom. I am so excited for our future." "I love you too," I replied, holding her close, "and I can't wait to see what the future holds for us." The decision to start a family brought a new sense of purpose and excitement to our lives. We began making plans, preparing for the next chapter of our journey together. It was a time of hope and anticipation, a testament to the strength of our love and commitment. As the months passed, Emily and I grew closer than ever. Our bond had been tested in ways we never could have imagined, but it had emerged stronger and more resilient. We had faced our darkest moments and found our way back to each other, ready to embrace the future together. One evening, as we sat on the porch, watching the stars twinkle in the night sky, I took Emily's hand in mine. "Emily, I want to thank you for never giving up on us," I said, my voice filled with emotion. "We've been through so much, but we've come out the other side stronger and more in love than ever." She smiled, her eyes shining with tears. "Thank you, Tom. Thank you for forgiving me, for believing in us, and for giving me a second chance. I love you more than words can say." "I love you too," I replied, leaning in to kiss her. "And I can't wait to see what the future holds for us and our family." As we sat there, wrapped in each other's arms, I realized that while our journey had been incredibly difficult, it had also brought us closer in ways I hadn't thought possible. We had faced our darkest moments and emerged stronger, more resilient, and more committed to each other than ever before. The road to healing and rebuilding our marriage was far from over, but I knew we would continue to take it one step at a time, together. And that, I realized, was all that mattered. The following months were filled with anticipation and a renewed sense of purpose. Emily and I began preparing for our future family, and the excitement of starting this new chapter brought us even closer together. We attended prenatal classes, researched baby names, and spent countless hours discussing our hopes and dreams for our future child. One sunny afternoon, while we were out shopping for baby supplies, my phone rang. It was Jason. "Hey, Tom," he said, his voice tinged with an unusual urgency. "Do you have a minute? There's something we need to talk about." "Sure. What's up?" I asked, stepping away from the aisle to find a quieter spot. "It's about my brother," Jason continued. "The investigation has taken a new turn, and there is something you and Emily need to know." My heart sank at the mention of Jason's brother. I thought we had put that chapter behind us, but it seemed like there were still loose ends to tie up. "Okay, let's meet. Can you come over to our place this evening?" I suggested, glancing over at Emily, who was examining baby clothes with a content smile on her face. "Yeah, that works. I'll see you then," Jason agreed before hanging up. As we finished our shopping and headed home, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Emily noticed my silence and reached over to squeeze my hand. "Everything okay?" she asked, concern etching her features. "Jason called," I replied, trying to keep my tone calm. "He wants to talk about the investigation. Something new has come up." Emily's smile faded, replaced by a look of apprehension. "What do you think it could be? I don't know, but we'll find out tonight," I said, giving her hand a reassuring squeeze. That evening, Jason arrived at our house, his expression serious. Laura was with him, her presence a comforting reminder that we weren't alone in this. "Thanks for meeting with us," Jason said as we all settled in the living room. "There's been a development in the investigation. They've uncovered more about my brother S. activities, and it is worse than we thought. Emily and I exchanged worried glances as Jason continued. They've discovered that he was involved in a larger criminal network, and they are still piecing together all the details. But here's the part that concerns us. They found evidence that he was planning to use his connections to drag more people into his schemes, including you, Emily. Emily S.'s face paled, and she clutched my hand tightly. What do you mean? Jason sighed heavily. He had documents with your name on them, Emily. It looks like he was planning to blackmail you into helping him again, using what he had on you as leverage. The room fell silent as the gravity of the situation sank in. Emily S.'s involvement had been deeper than we realized, and the danger she had been in was far greater than we had imagined. What do we do now? I asked, my mind racing with worry for Emily and our unborn child. The authorities are aware of the situation, Jason explained. They've offered protection for Emily and will provide support to ensure she's safe. They've also advised us to be vigilant and report anything suspicious. Emily nodded, her face resolute. I am willing to do whatever it takes to keep our family safe. I am done running from this. I felt a surge of pride and love for her. Despite everything we had been through, Emily's strength and determination were unwavering. Thank you for telling us, Jason, I said, my voice filled with gratitude. We'll do whatever it takes to get through this. As Jason and Laura left, Emily and I sat in silence, processing the information. The weight of the past still hung over us, but we were determined to face it together. The following weeks were a whirlwind of meetings with the authorities, securing our home and ensuring Emily's safety. The stress was palpable, but we leaned on each other for support, knowing that our bond was stronger than ever. One evening, as we sat on the porch, Emily turned to me with a determined look. Tom, I've been thinking. Maybe it's time for a fresh start, somewhere new. A place where we can put all of this behind us and focus on our future. I considered her words, the idea of starting over both daunting and appealing. You mean move? She nodded. Yes, a new place, a new beginning. We've come so far, and I think it would be good for us, for our family. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. A fresh start would give us the opportunity to leave the past behind and build a new life together, free from the shadows that had haunted us. You're right, I said, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. Let us do it. Let us find a new place to call home. We spent the next few weeks searching for our new home, a place where we could create new memories and focus on the future. We finally found a charming house in a quiet, picturesque town, far from the city and all the reminders of the past. The move was both exhilarating and bittersweet. We packed up our belongings, said goodbye to friends and neighbors, and embarked on a new journey. As we settled into our new home, the sense of peace and hope that enveloped us was undeniable. One evening, as we stood in our new backyard watching the sunset, Emily took my hand. This feels right, she said, her voice filled with contentment. A new beginning just for us. I nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. It does, and I am ready for whatever comes next, as long as we are together. As we stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, I realized that while our journey had been incredibly difficult, it had also brought us closer in ways I hadn't thought possible. We had faced our darkest moments and emerged stronger, more resilient, and more committed to each other than ever before. The road to healing and rebuilding our marriage was far from over, but I knew we would continue to take it one step at a time, together. And that, I realized, was all that mattered. Our new life in the picturesque town provided the fresh start we needed. Emily and I settled into a peaceful routine, embracing the simplicity and tranquility of our new surroundings. We decorated the nursery, went for long walks in the nearby woods, and spent evenings on our porch, watching the stars twinkle in the clear night sky. Emily's pregnancy progressed smoothly, and the anticipation of welcoming our child filled our hearts with joy and excitement. Our bond grew stronger with each passing day, and the sense of trust and understanding we had worked so hard to rebuild became the foundation of our renewed relationship. One crisp autumn morning, as we were having breakfast, Emily winced and clutched her belly. My heart raced with a mix of excitement and anxiety. "I think it A's time," she said, her voice trembling with a combination of fear and anticipation. I sprang into action, grabbing the hospital bag we had prepared and helping Emily to the car. The drive to the hospital felt like an eternity, but we finally arrived, and Emily was whisked away to the delivery room. The hours that followed were a blur of emotions. I held Emily's hand, offering words of encouragement and love as she labored to bring our child into the world. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the cries of our newborn filled the room, and tears of joy streamed down my face. "It's Essa girl," the doctor announced, placing our tiny wriggling daughter into Emily's arms. Emily looked down at our daughter, her eyes filled with love and awe. "She perfect," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. I leaned in, kissing Emily's forehead and then our daughter's tiny hand. "She is. Welcome to the world, little one." We named her Grace, a symbol of the second chance we had been given and the new beginning we were embracing as a family. The days that followed were filled with sleepless nights, diaper changes, and the overwhelming joy of watching our daughter grow and thrive. As I held Grace in my arms one evening, rocking her gently to sleep, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this moment. The pain and betrayal, the struggle to rebuild trust, and the decision to start anew had all led us to this point. It hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. Emily joined me, wrapping her arms around us both. "We did it, Tom. We made it through the storm." I nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude and love. "We did, and I couldn't have done it without you." She smiled, resting her head on my shoulder. "We are a team, always." As we stood there watching our daughter sleep, I knew that our journey was far from over. There would be challenges and obstacles ahead, but we had proven that we could face them together. Our love had been tested and had emerged stronger, more resilient, and more enduring than ever before. The road to healing and rebuilding our marriage would continue, but I knew that as long as we had each other, we could overcome anything. And that, I realized, was the greatest gift of all. In the years that followed, Emily and I continued to nurture our love and commitment to each other. We celebrated the milestones of Grace's growth, from her first steps to her first words, and cherished the simple moments of family life. Our bond deepened with each passing year, and the trust we had worked so hard to rebuild became the bedrock of our relationship. We faced challenges and setbacks, but we faced them together, knowing that our love and determination would see us